Greetings. It is Wednesday, March the 5th, 2025. I'm Thomas Caldwell of the Aurelian Column, and this is a special report, President Trump's address to Congress. Well, I should call it President Trump's address to half of Congress, given the way half of it, or less than half of it, fortunately, operated in such childishness that I just couldn't believe it. You wanted to see Clown World, that was it. We'll go into that in a minute. First off, it was a long speech, about an hour, 40-something minutes, the longest speech a president has ever given to a joint session of Congress. There was a lot said, but there was also a lot not said. What was not said was the U.S. leaving NATO, although that has been rumored for a while, and a lot of people were speculating he would make an announcement of that kind. It was also not announced that the mineral deal that has been talked about almost exclusively for some days now was being signed with Ukraine. A lot of rumors about those two topics, which means, quite simply, in Washington, that there's a lot of discussion behind the scenes about them. We'll see what occurs as the days progress. Now, Ukraine was briefly mentioned, and how much money they were given, which is a number that changes all the time, somewhere between $100 billion and $500 billion, just to show that how much the U.S. government needs to keep track of its money, or I should say our money. I think at some point we'll have a full accounting, and hopefully we'll be able to track down where it all went and whose pockets it went into, and if any of those pockets are or were in the audience last night. Well, let's hope that they look good in orange. Europe was not talked about at all. The EU was not discussed. The way that Europe has been in total panic mode was not talked about. However, Trump did mention reciprocal tariffs, which is very easy and very fair. If a country charges 25% on an American product, they will be charged 25%. If they charge 200%, they're charged 200%, and I imagine if they charge nothing, they are charged nothing. That's completely fair. Why would anybody object to that? Well, Clown World Democrats apparently do, predicting the end of the world and all sorts of wonderful things. But Trump went into some of the worst cases of waste and fraud that has been uncovered by the Department of Government Efficiency, otherwise known as DOGE. One particular case I learned about from a congressman is quite repulsive. I've decided against reporting it this morning since many of you have just eaten breakfast or are about to. Perhaps I'll fill you in later on, but there are things the U.S. government has been up to which not even the worst Hollywood horror writers could imagine. Now, of course, the Democrats, showing what children they are. Al Green, the cane-toting congressman from Texas, was very disruptive for no reason whatsoever, and he has now set a record, or at least entered the history books from what I can find out. Congressman Green is the first member of Congress to be expelled by the Sergeant-at-Arms during a presidential address. At the best I could find in the amount of time I had to research that, but apparently he's the first. That's insane. And what did it accomplish? Nothing. What did it accomplish for his constituents? Absolutely nothing. What did it accomplish for the way the American people view the Democratic Party? Didn't help. I mean, these are people that we've actually trusted to head our affairs. There were a lot of rude remarks, but that was, I think that they got the message after that, and they just sat there holding up signs. And by the way, speaking of Doge, there's a remarkable video that's come out that explains how Trump and Musk prepared for their attack on the federal government status quo and how they're carrying it off. You can find that video up on my X account, MICCAMPEN, or my Substack channel, which is where this podcast originates. I highly recommend it. It's about 15 minutes long. What we're dealing with here was a very well thought out attack on the swamp, and it's succeeding, and it's really, really, really hitting these people on their flank. They weren't expecting it. The deep state was not expecting what's hitting it now, which is why it has a pretty good chance of succeeding. Now, there's always a bit of sappiness that goes on in these sorts of things. This I remember back as 1981. Ronald Reagan had someone in the visitors gallery who just a couple of days earlier had helped rescue people from a plane crash that occurred in the Potomac River. Basically, there's people that the president invites to attend these sorts of sessions that have done something extraordinary or have survived something extraordinary or something tragic. Traditionally, both sides of the aisle will applaud when there's a person that stands up who's done something heroic or who has overcome some terrible obstacle in life or fought a disease or something like that. Well, not these Democrats. One of the people that were in the visitors gallery, the president cited and told a rather heartwarming story, was a 13-year-old boy who has aspired to be a law enforcement officer but was diagnosed 6 years ago with brain cancer, was only given a few months to live, and is still alive. And from what I can see, none of the Democrats who were present applauded him. A 13-year-old boy who has survived brain cancer and is still fighting for his life. Oh, really? That's something that is only MAGA people should be fans of? What about humans? I mean, come on. That's the level of childishness that the Democrats, the liberal Marxist establishment has demonstrated, people. They're not just fools. They're not just stupid. They're morally repulsive. I saw that and said, my goodness. There were a few other people up there who've survived illegals killing their loved ones. There was a member of the Border Patrol who was up there in uniform who had done some heroic things fighting at the border. And there is fighting at the border. Those cartels are not giving up easy, and they are monstrous. That's the level of human indecency that the liberal democratic woke establishment has sunk to. Yeah, let's not affirm a 13-year-old boy who's fought cancer. By the way, the crowning achievement on this 13-year-old boy's life was he was made a Secret Service agent by none other than the new head of the Secret Service. That's the guy that you see with the sunglasses that's staring at you, and Trump was shot back in July in Butler. Yeah, Trump decided I can trust this guy and made him head of the Secret Service. But come on, we're talking about kids here. I think that's nice. Thank you, Mr. Trump, and thank you, young man. Good luck to you. One thing I think needs to be pointed out, and that is a man I think is the most evil in the legislative branch of government, and just like demons will sometimes show their true nature, this guy did. The person you want to watch was Chuck Schumer. When Trump is entering the House chamber, he's going down the aisle and he's shaking hands with people. None of the liberals shook his hand that I saw, but when he goes by Chuck Schumer, Mr. Schumer has his head down reading something, and he has these eyeglasses over his rather pronounced nose, and he is looking off to the side in the most sinister way I've ever seen. And it made me rather worried. It made me a little sick. The pure evil emanating from that man. I thought he was just another opportunistic Democratic politician, but Senator Schumer looked totally evil. I'm going to go back and make a screen capture of that and put it up on my Substack channel. That's going to make one heck of a meme, I'll tell you. But I do not trust the look in that man's eyes, and I think we really have to watch him and what he's going to be up to. As we all know, the deep state's not going to die easy, and he is Mr. Deep State if there ever was one. So go back and check that out, but I'll get a screen capture and put it up online later for you folks. Yes, those eyes, that face, and that sinister air. Be careful. Be careful, Mr. Trump. Now, the president also pointed out many obvious things and his immediate accomplishments, transgender insanity being put to an end. And a few victims of that insanity were also in the visitors' gallery, worth watching. Other things were discussed as well, but the event showed more than anything else how divided the U.S. has become, or I should say, how the liberal left-wing establishment has become divorced from reality. I don't think they're really anything close to a majority. There's a lot of people that just vote out of habit, but I think they have far less power than we give them credit for, but they are not to be underestimated. It was a good speech. It wasn't fantastic, but Trump is there to convey information and point out what he's doing and point out why he's doing it. And that was the whole point of it. But I really am glad that he pointed out a few stories that needed to be told. And the Visitors Gallery is always a fascinating place when it comes to presidential addresses to Congress. There's always a formal rebuttal. I don't think that began until the Reagan years. But Bernie Sanders, of course, the ultra-liberal senator from New England, weighed in afterwards with his usual socialist liberal claptrap. That's to be expected. At least the guy's consistent. You got to give him credit for that, and he's always going to fight, no matter what. He's going to talk about climate change and talk about abortion and all these other things. But the formal response from the Democratic Party came from Senator Elissa Slotkin from Michigan. Now, I didn't know who she was. She's new. She's an interesting lady with a very interesting background that she herself talked about. You know, she's a former CIA agent who did 3 tours of duty in the Middle East. Wow. That's an admission. From the CIA to the U.S. Senate. Now, to be fair, intelligence operatives are important in any government. They're the first line of defense. They are supposed to tell you what's going on, and of course, I have no idea what she was doing there. But that's not exactly something that you want to show off these days, especially given the way the world has gone. Anyway, she seemed to be very educated and very smart until she opened her mouth. More of the same rhetoric that can't explain away what Trump's people have been learning and how effective they've been so far. I mean, she's trying to counter something that anyone with common sense can't counter. She was talking about, the federal employees and all. Come on. But the thing that really got me is that she actually said that propping up the border before, I believe she used the term, fixing our broke immigration system was extreme. What? Guarding the border, putting the military there to stop all the illegals coming in, the drug dealers, the human traffickers, that's extreme until we fix our immigration system. What on earth is this lady talking about? I can't tell you how hard it is to report this stuff. I remember when the United States was sane. I remember Reagan. Liberals back then were respectable. I had many who were friends, even though I disagreed with them on how certain things should be. But still, you see, these people really can't attack Trump with logic. They have to use illogic. Somebody was holding up a sign that said, "Pay your taxes." What are they talking about? Trump pays his taxes, as far as I know. There's a lot of people in Congress who came in with not much money and are now worth tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, there are people that need to be audited. Love to see where they got their money from. I suggest you check out the senator's rebuttal, really. Now, I watched it on the Associated Press YouTube channel. The comments there were quite funny and more than a little suspicious. Almost all of them were glowingly positive about what a true patriot she was or how right she was. But for some reason, most didn't address anything she said specifically, as if they were all prepared ahead of time and then put up there. And a lot of people were noticing that I wonder how that's possible. I mean, she's great. She's wonderful. And what does she talk about? Well, we're not going to mention that. Whoever wrote that stuff and put it up on the Associated Press YouTube channel, I hope you're well paid for it. But I tend to think it was not a human and some AI bot. Those are the times we live in, people. Those are the times we live in. Things are going to get more and more interesting. This is just an announcement that Trump had of what he's doing. Over the coming days, please look to see what goes on with Europe and NATO. I still think there's a pretty good chance that we are going to leave that organization. And what would be better if it was reconstituted into something called the Pan-Atlantic European Defense Cooperative or something, and include Russia. I mean, if Russia was allowed to join NATO back in the 90s when they wanted to, I doubt very much there would have been a war with Ukraine. This is the thing that people have to think about, look to the long term. We're going to be talking about NATO and the military relationship with the United States in the coming days. We're going to hear about Ukraine. Ukraine has been cut off from all aid, financial and military. That means that what troops are there, and there are U.S. soldiers in Ukraine running things, those missiles that they have don't operate on their own. They're probably going to get pulled out. And we are going to see more and more revelations from Mr. Musk and his team at Doge. And that's going to get worse and worse and worse. From all accounts and from my own contacts, I'm being told that they're just scratching the surface. You're looking at a little tiny top of a massive iceberg under the water, and that's going to get, well, the Chinese have an old curse, may you live in interesting times, and we certainly live in interesting times, but the people who are cursed are the ones that have been pulling the wool over our eyes and robbing us blind and causing all sorts of mayhem both within the United States and around the world. Well, yeah, the chickens have come home to roost. And those of us who have chickens, because eggs are so expensive, are very happy that the worm has turned and the revolution 2.0 is on. That's it for today. If you appreciate my work, please like, subscribe, and share, and please consider a paid subscription. Really, the lights have to stay on somehow, and that's a good way to help out. I also have a fundraiser going for new equipment, which is very much needed if I'm to expand this little operation. I can be reached at feedback@aureliancolumn.com. That's feedback@aureliancolumn.com. I'm up on X. My handle there is MICCAMPEN. That's MICCAMPEN. This podcast originates at Substack. My address there is aureliancolumn.substack.com. Until we meet again, be good, be safe, be vigilant, and remember, Clown World and the Deep State not only must be destroyed, they must be rendered unto dust and tossed onto the ash heap of history. Good day.